Hello everyone and welcome to MG28 Talks Tech. And I hope wherever you are today, you are living the dream just like I am. My name is Mac and I will be your host for these talks. With over a decade of experience in the technology profession, I am hoping to bring what I know to all of you in an easy to understand way. We will cover a wide variety of topics, so if you have anything you want covered, make sure to leave it in the comments section or hit me up on one of my social media accounts that will be in the description. If you enjoy these talks, make sure to like and subscribe or even share with a friend so we can reach others and make a fun and collaborative community here. We will get started in just a few seconds, so lean back, take a drink of your favorite beverage, and come along and take an adventure into our talk today. Hey everyone, and thanks for joining on episode 7 of my Cyber Sunday series. I know typically on Sundays we cover cybersecurity related stories and I dig in deeper and help you guys kind of understand the story and how you can help protect yourselves from a particular threat or activity that people are doing. Well, today I kind of wanted to change it up, and I've been thinking about doing a video on a couple different methodologies that project teams in the technology sector use when creating new systems or different projects type deals. So taking something from an idea all the way to getting it deployed and maintenance type deal. So that's what I'm going to cover today. I'm going to compare Waterfall versus Agile methodologies. So let's dig into it. So when I say methodologies in this environment, I'm really talking about, in its purest form, the different steps that are taken from idea all the way to deployment and maintenance. So within that, you typically have like concept, initiation, analysis, design, things like that. So we're going to go through how Waterfall and Agile use those processes, go through that methodology, and what the difference is, and kind of my ideas of the pros and cons of each, and maybe Waterfall shouldn't just be swept under the table for all project teams, and how Waterfall might be able to be used versus Agile, and when Agile might be the better option. So let's go over Waterfall, right? So with Waterfall, you have, like I was talking about, conception, initiation, analysis, design, construction, testing, and deployment. Deployment is also going to take into consideration maintenance. So you'll see some diagrams don't have all of these steps or they label them differently, but really it comes down to these steps. And Waterfall, naturally, you have to go from the top of the waterfall all the way to the bottom. You can't really reverse stream on a waterfall and go up a piece of, the waterfall, like here, the rocks here. You can't really go up a piece of the rock with the water. The water all has to come down. And that is the concept in Waterfall methodology. You have to complete the step before in order to go down, right? So you have to complete conception in order to be able to go to initiation. Then you have to finish initiation to go to analysis. Same for design, then construction, then testing, then deployment. But that is for the entire idea or the entire business case, the entire project. Everything has to go together from one step to another. So when we talk about conception, we're talking about the idea, right? So, and a lot of times that'll be called a business case. So the business case, a person from the business side typically, could be from the technology side. Most of the time it's from the business side, comes up with something they would like either to create a system to do or an update for the current system that would provide business value in some way. So they create a business case, and a meeting is done a lot of times between business stakeholders. So that might include a technology officer, a VP from different departments within the business. Every piece of the business should be represented in this type of meeting. to go over these business cases. And then you have people, of course, from the technology side. And I would highly recommend in these meetings that a business analyst be in them so they can kind of help, with the idea from the technology side. And a business analyst should be able to speak both the business language and the technology language. So they are big pieces when it comes to both of these methodologies. So from conception, once that business case is, approved, and you go to initiation, really starting to dig more in depth into that business case and analysis. So in between, depending on how your project works, either an initiation or analysis, you're probably going to do an analysis on resources. So what's it going to cost the business to do? What is your ROI, your return on investment on it? So it's going to cost me X, and eventually I will earn that money back in what amount of time? So how long am I going to get my investment returned from this project and make money from it? And then also a lot of times between analysis and design, typically you'll have your business analyst write the full specification for what the project will be and how it should be according from the business case. So that goes into a lot of design as well. So design, a lot of times the specification will be for the most part done, but you're talking more with the development teams, maybe just the team leads or something like that, about the business case and how technology wise it can be done to finish up the specification. Also get an approval of that specification from the business. And then you're going to go to construction. Construction is where all your development happens. Once development's done, it'll go to testing. Once it passes testing, it'll go to deployment / maintenance. So in Waterfall, you're just going to go down these steps. Now with Agile just kind of a more of a flow, right? So, but in Agile, it breaks projects down to individual, what they call user stories. So a user stories is going to be all the way down to, as a certain type of user, I want to do something so that I can do some task, right? And these user stories then get put into what's called a backlog. So they all get put into this backlog, this area, so they can then be put into 2-week intervals of work or sprints. And so the main objective for Agile is to first deploy the minimal viable product. So what is the most basic product we can provide that still provides value, but then we can add on to it every 2 weeks. So we're going to give you the minimum product that provides value and then add to it every 2 weeks to start adding additional value. And so a lot of these, so you see it's the same steps as Waterfall, but a lot of these steps happen in tandem, or they can go back and forth, right? So initiation and analysis, or analysis and design, a lot of times go together. Construction and testing, a lot of times go together. You'll even have design and construction, right, go together, which can seem weird, right? How are you going to have design and construction go together? Well, in Agile, it tends to lean more for, here's the user story, but it doesn't have in depth how that user story should be done from a technology aspect. So the developer starts on it, and then the design kind of happens while they're working on it. So then testing, of course, has to be done before deployment and maintenance. So Agile, very much more Agile. So it provides the project team agility, right? So go back and forth, gives them more options on what they want to work on, so they could choose the stories that they want to work on, as long as it's still providing value to and not dependent on other items. It also allows the business to start getting value earlier than what necessarily Waterfall would, and build on it from there. So let's really dig into pros and cons from my perspective of Waterfall versus Agile. I've worked in both environments as a business analyst, as part of a project team. I've helped a couple of companies or project teams go from Waterfall to Agile. And one thing I've noticed with Agile is most teams don't do Agile in its purest form. There always tends to be something within the Agile methodology that doesn't quite fit with what that project team wants to do, so they adjust it, which is fine. Same thing happens with Waterfall a lot of times. Both of these methodologies aren't necessarily just take out of the box and use them. You can if that works for your project team, but what's most important is what works for your project team. So with Waterfall, because it is such a step-by-step process, it naturally creates more documentation, right? Your full specification, no matter if that's a functional or a technical specification, right? So functional specification is going to be just what the user sees. How does the user use this? A technical specification is going to be more of, okay, we're getting all the way down to even databases and database tables, and this is exactly what the database tables are going to have, and this is the names and things like that. I've written both sides of that, so I see the pros and cons of functional versus technical specifications, which we can do a whole nother time. And in Agile, just because of the nature of how fast-paced it kind of goes, because you're in 2-week sprints most of the time, so you're constantly working, there is less documentation. You're not required to write a full specification ever in Agile. You write the user stories, and the development team and the project team go based off of those user stories. A business analyst should be in there to help, the developers really go from the user story to how it should function and look. But that business analyst is not writing a full specification most of the time in Agile. I've been in Agile environments where we were moving from Waterfall to Agile and they still wanted a full specification, but it does delay a little bit of that Agile methodology, which is not something Agile methodology typically likes, right? It wants to move at a faster pace so it can continue to provide value, because you're not delivering a complete product, right? The complete business case is not being delivered at the first deployment. Just the MVP, just that minimal viable product is being delivered typically in Agile. So we talked about linear workflow versus concurrent workflow in Agile, right? That's the biggest differences in them. With Waterfall, because it is an entire project being deployed at one time, the project plan that is a lot of times created within Waterfall is a lot more rigid. It is required that slip-ups do happen, but it's a very more rigid timeline. All the teams are expected to deliver on their timeline, and if there are issues, you have to tell people in a good, timely manner so that project plan can be adjusted, because we are planning resources for when you are done to then work, right? All of our planned resources in Waterfall are dependent on the previous step being completed. Where in Agile, because it's broken down into user stories, right? You can have one user story be complete and a different user story not be ready for testing, right? So you have user story A ready for testing, user story B not ready for testing in the same sprint, right? So ideally they're going to get deployed together in that sprint. But as long as user case A is not dependent on user case B, it can go to testing without user story B, right? Agile, that's the main focus of Agile. Getting things done when, and deployed when they're done. So then you can add additional user stories if you finish early. So timelines for Agile, if a user story doesn't get completed, it just moves on to the next sprint. So a lot of times we see timelines in Agile aren't always as rigid as they are in Waterfall. Resources are constantly being used. You're not having to typically plan your resources around a previous stage. So those timelines, sometimes, like I said, not so rigid. I've seen a lot of projects not have original timelines met in both Waterfall and Agile. My experience, Agile timelines are a lot more, have to be a lot more flexible. So we talked about full specification versus user stories. And the biggest thing for me, if you are trying to go Waterfall to Agile, make sure your stakeholders understand the time commitment that it's going to be in Agile. My experience has told me there is a lot bigger of a time commitment needed from stakeholders in Agile. So if your stakeholders aren't creating a new position to take their place in these Agile meetings, at least on a weekly basis, Agile may not be the best option. In Waterfall, the reason I say you can time box the stakeholder time better is because at the beginning of the project, right, from business case to writing my specification, I will meet with the stakeholders, I will gather requirements from them, and when my specification is done, I will send it to them and say, please confirm this is everything we've talked about, this is how you're wanting the system to flow. They will read through that specification, yep, we're good. Okay, it'll go to development, and then development will work on it, it'll get tested, and in that time period, I don't necessarily need to talk to the stakeholders again unless something unforeseen comes up. The next time I will typically talk to that stakeholder, other than for possibly an update for that business case that we're working on, is to demo it after testing is completed. Before we deploy it, we're going to demo it, make sure it's still everything they need based on the requirements we had. Don't let scope creep happen, but make sure that it is done based on the requirements that we're given, and then let them know, hey, if you're going to do training, start getting your training ready, and then we're going to deploy this, right? Scheduled deployments, everything is very scheduled, thought out in Waterfall. Agile, you still have planned deployments, a lot of times on a 2 weeks basis. I've seen some teams do 4 weeks. Most of the time in Agile, it's 2 week sprints. But because everything is so quickly moving, stakeholders have to be at least, most of the time it's more than one meeting a week, but at least in one meeting a week to discuss stories being worked on, questions that came up when they are working on it, doing construction and design. You're also looking through the backlog of stories that have been created and saying, okay, in the next sprint, what items would you like to have worked on? Now they can they can tell us what they would like to have worked on. Development team also gets an option. Agile makes the development team have a lot more options and opportunities in those user stories. Also dependent on your project team. I've seen it to where the business has full control on what user stories get chosen next, as long as there's no technical dependencies, but I've also seen it where development has all the say in it. So just think about what your project team really needs and what is available for your project team. If you don't have, if your stakeholders don't have the time to be in additional meetings and they're not going to appoint somebody to be their spokesperson in those meetings, Agile might not be the right option. Or Agile in its purest form may not be the right option. If you want more documentation, you want a full specification to kind of bring the whole project together so it's easy for the next person who comes in to understand what's going on, then Agile may not be the right form for you. Waterfall might be better. If, business cases tend to stay in the backlog for a long time and not get updated, Waterfall may not be a good option, because once that business case, is put in there and all the information is received, a lot of times it doesn't get looked at again. I would contradict that though. When I was a BA, when I was a business analyst, when we got a business case, especially if it was older, we always went back to the stakeholder or the user to get the latest information. Is this still needed? Is this still what you want? Here's the specification. Is this everything you want? If you want any additions, you need to tell us now. A lot of people don't consider that in Waterfall. They think that, oh, if a business case is a year old, you're just going by year-old information. That is not the case most of the time in Waterfall, in my experience at least. That is not how we ever did Waterfall. Agile, you are getting new information in all of these meetings. You are going to have a daily stand-up most of the time in Agile. If you are running Scrum meetings, you're going to have daily talks with development. Make sure everybody's on the same page. Everybody's got their work that that they're working on. They have no holdups, and if there are, something that's holding them back from being able to complete something, project managers are informed very early. Those are all good reasons to use Agile. So again, just take the pros and cons. There are plenty of them out there. See what will work best for your project team. I don't personally think Waterfall should just be tossed away, because I think there is plenty of good reasons to still use Waterfall. But you guys tell me, what do you think? In your project teams, are you guys using a combination of Waterfall and Agile? Are you just using Agile, but maybe, you see some of the cons I brought up of Agile? Do you think Waterfall really doesn't have, any place for current development? Let me know. Hit me up in the comments on social media. I will also be posting this on my LinkedIn, so you can hit me up there too. All right. I hope you guys keep living the dream, and I will see you next week.